and welcome to this new initiative, new series that we are putting together for MCCIA, the Malad Chamber of Commerce, Industries and Agriculture. We are focusing on new fuels, new energy initiatives, new mobility, and this is an interesting area for the world, for India, and also for Pune. And who better to start this with than Praj, which is one of the pioneers in India and globally in the biofuels area. Today we are very fortunate to have Mr. Shishir Joshipura, who is the MD and CEO of Praj. Good to have you, Shishir.
Good morning, Amit.
So, with Shishir, we'll be talking about a lot of the interesting developments, technology developments that are happening in this space, and we will also learn about some of the new things that Praj is focused on in this particular area. So, before we start, let me give a quick background of Praj and Shishir as well. Praj was started by Mr. Pramod Chaudhary, one of the top entrepreneurs in Pune nearly 4 decades back, and it's focused on a variety of different areas, starting with various kinds of chemical processing, ethanol production, industrial wastewater treatment, breweries, and in biofuels, of course. And they have been, one of the things that has differentiated Praj over the years is they have invested a huge amount in R&D, and that's something that is unfortunately not very typical in Indian companies, and we'll learn a little bit more about that as we progress in this discussion. Shishir is an alumnus of BITS Pilani, and he has done an advanced management program at the Harvard Business School as well. He started his career in Thermax and has spent many years there, and has also worked in leadership positions at SKF. He took over his current role about 3 years back. So let's start with this new and interesting space, Shishir. What is exciting about biofuels? Why is it suddenly so much into the news lately? It's something that has always been at the forefront, but seems like the kind of things that the government is doing, and it seems like it's gone to the next orbit in the last few years.
Amit, you said it very nicely that it's gone into the next orbit. It's always been there. We have used biofuels for many years, but something has shifted and changed. And I think very clearly there has been a much deeper and better understanding of what biofuels can do to an economy. And I think as the mankind progresses, this is one solution, and I'll explain that in a while, is that actually goes and impacts every stakeholder of the society in a very positive way. Mm-hmm. And let me start by saying, so let's think of a farmer. Today, especially at this time of the year, we know that our national capital is full of smoke, mm-hmm. right? And a big cause, not the only cause, but a big cause, especially for these 2 months, is attributed to the stubble burning of the farmers in the surrounding states. Mm-hmm. And the smoke that then travels because of the winds pushing it over the capital, etc. And so farmer is burning. Why is he burning? Because that's the cheapest way and the quickest way for him to get rid of this stubble, which has no other value for him. Mm-hmm. Actually, burning creates a little bit of a value for him, although a little bit on the field side. But the health of the citizens in Delhi is impacted and the surrounding areas.
Right.
Okay. If we think of this instead as a waste, if we think of stubble as an energy resource, then your entire outlook to this problem changes. You are now saying, I don't have a waste, I have a resource. Mm-hmm. And the moment I start to look at it as a resource, then I say, all right, what can I do with this resource? Can I use this? Can I convert this? All of us, at the end of the day, mankind's engineering is focused on converting every possible known facet of nature to usable form mm-hmm. for mankind, or for betterment of mankind. And from that perspective, if we take this stubble and convert this to a usable form of energy, mm-hmm. I have very clearly created a value for which farmer can benefit and participate in the value chain.
Right.
So farmer is now a happy lot. Mm-hmm. The companies that will develop the technology and put it on the ground are obviously happy lot, because they will put up the projects and things like that. Then there'll be people who will be putting up the projects and running those projects. So they are the operators of the project. So let's look at it. I start with rice straw. I convert that to a usable form of energy, which could be ethanol, mm-hmm. which is directly blended into petrol today. Mm-hmm. And you don't know it, but when we go and fill petrol in the car, it's not petrol, it is petrol plus ethanol.
I think we're up to 5%.
We are up to 5% now.
excellent.
Government of India has a very, very ambitious plan of going up to 20% blending
Wow.
by 2030. And many times we always say, yeah, but this is a plan. Where has it been done before?
Exactly, and I was going to come to that because see, basically, this is something. I mean, we've been talking about things like gobar gas for 30 plus years, right? We've been talking about composting. So it seems like one of the most logical things to do when
Absolutely.
you have agriculture waste, farm waste, domestic waste converted into energy. So what exactly have been the barriers to really make this economical? Is it just oil was too cheap, or this process was too complicated?
So before I get, let me just finish my first answer. That will probably link
Okay.
it back. So farmer is a happy lot now. If I don't burn, the citizen of Delhi are happy.
Yes,
and citizen
of course,
is
of course.
And by the way, this is a problem not only in Delhi. This is a problem everywhere. Everywhere in the world, farmers burn the stubble. So unless you're in an advanced economy, that's what is happening.
Right.
So that's the truth. By converting that into a usable form of energy, you have done one more thing, that you are no longer dependent, especially for an oil or energy importing economy. You are no longer importing to that extent.
Right.
It's now your country's money is staying inside the same family of sorts.
Right.
So the country is happy as an economy. You're saving foreign exchange. Your energy security is to that extent is higher. Your independence on energy is higher. These are all different geopolitical equations that play at
Right.
different times, as we have learned. So government is a happy lot. Okay, but the biggest, and I personally believe this is the biggest plus point, is that when you convert agricultural residue into a usable form of energy, either in ethanol form or in gas form, you are actually protecting the long-term future of the planet,
Right. Of course.
because you are saving greenhouse gas emission. And I always ask this question, that at the end of the day, there is nobody, you can ask room full of people saying, why do you work? And we say we work for betterment of our children. And conscious, everybody will say, yes, I work for betterment. Then let's ask them, would you do anything knowingly that will harm that? And everybody will say no. And yet when we walk out of that room, we do exactly the opposite. And I believe it's because unconsciously we don't recognize what we're doing. But this whole GHG reduction on this whole chain actually goes and protects the planet,
Of course.
because the crude oil based economies or the technologies are not CO2 friendly.
Right. Right.
So to me, that's the biggest plus point. Having said this, now I'll come back to the answer of why it was what was complicated. Yes, technology has traveled a lot. The journey undertaken by technology in terms of what is possible from these difficult to deal with agri residues and some of the other organic matters is one dimension. The second is we also have to have an ecosystem, right?
Right.
Which is the policy, the user equations, the infrastructure, the production units, and I think it takes some time for it to come into being to a
Correct.
critical mass. And I believe we are at that kind of a tipping point now, where the whole world is, and this is not only in India, because our government is very progressive.
Right.
There are several governments in the world which are beginning to recognize this as a very positive value. And because of that, I believe that there is a thinking that as an agrarian economy, especially if I'm agrarian and I'm energy importing,
Exactly.
if these two are ticks, all governments are sitting up and taking notice and saying, what can I do to harness this resource,
Correct,
which
correct.
hitherto was considered a waste,
Correct.
and actually increase my national wealth?
Correct. And countries like Brazil have probably been at the forefront in utilizing some of this.
Absolutely,
Much
Brazil-
earlier than us.
Absolutely, Brazil has led the way. They have been at it for a very long time. Their ecosystem is something that the world can learn from. The whole
I think their
interplay-
percentage is much higher, or they're using almost regular ethanol as.
You're absolutely correct. So Brazil created this whole economy around. So today you can go to a Brazil pump and you can choose what you want to buy. What's called E85, E10,
Right,
different blending ratios. You can buy, and they are planning to switch over to a completely biofuel based economy over the next 10 years. They have launched a very innovative program called BioRenovo, which is going to push that. What they have done is they have created a good symbiosis between this whole ecosystem of automotive companies, the dispensing stations infrastructure, the producers of bioenergy, the technology companies, the farmers, the whole and it's been working like a fine symbiosis. So I think the demand from the automotive manufacturers would be tell us. Because and therefore it's very important to have a uniform rollout and uniform policy, because if I am a car maker, I cannot determine that this car will go to south of India and this will go to north of India. That won't happen. And the North India car can easily travel to south of India. So I would like to know over a long term period of time, how is this availability of fuel going to pan out? And that's what I said, that Brazil done a very, very good job of in a synchronous way, and they have not gone to 27% overnight. They have also gone in a stepwise manner. And I think that's what our path is. Today, if you look at it, I think we are amongst the nations with the most progressive policies on encouraging use of bioenergy in our mix. And the recent program which the government has launched, it's now 2 years old, called Satta, which is focused on making sustainably available a very affordable fuel for transportation, which is clean, which is gas. So obviously the whole ecosystem will to adjust to this, but we have seen, at least I'm aware of it, if you travel to cities which are not these big metro cities, but let's say a largest town or district headquarters in say Uttar Pradesh, you will actually see lots and lots of old cars and old vehicles converted to gas. And there is a whole industry that has cropped up around gas conversion. If you really ask me, today many people would convert to gas. Why? Because it is clean, it is green, and it is cheaper. The only problem is not there.
It's not available.
It's not available. So I don't want to stand in long lines.
Of course. And I think we have seen some of the queues in Pune. They've improved a lot.
At a very few places. So that's the infrastructure part I was talking about. But now with this program, where the government has set a target of setting up 5,000 plants in the country, which would, so 5,000 tells you that they are local in nature. So this is like distributed generation of energy. So they are closer to the farmer in the field. And of course, they can also then help boost the rural economy, because then you can have clean and green energy.
So let's come back to the macro picture in India now and globally as well. But we've seen a lot of these promising developments over the years, and especially recently. And now, as you said, the ecosystem is also supporting it, including the government policy, which is a very important angle. And of course, there's a global consensus on this as well with the Paris Accord and other things as well. Now, let's put this in numbers. Over the next 5 years, let's say, what kind of opportunity do you see for biofuels in terms of, let's say, percentage of energy contributed to India or even globally? What level of impact can biofuels really make in different sectors, whether it's automobiles, whether it's locomotives, whether it's airlines, I mean at multiple levels.
Yes. So we have this very interesting concept which we launched at Praj called biomobility. So biomobility actually says that biomobility addresses a whole suite of technologies that bring to fore use of low carbon fuels that are produced using a renewable resource. That's the broad definition. And across all forms of transportation, whether it is on surface, air, or marine. So there is lots of work that is happening about, and I'm very happy to share with you. So surface is very clear. There's ethanol and there's gas. Very time-tested, proven. Already, it's now a question of
some amount of biodiesel. I guess that's.
Yes, I'll come to biodiesel, which is a little different subject. So that's very clearly one. The second one is about air transportation, because on the surface there is still an alternative called e-mobility.
There's none.
Or electric. I think we are still at least quite a few decades away from electric aircrafts.
Of course.
Unless Elon Musk or somebody has a different idea, then I don't know. But so if that is the case, then what do you do? Because for airline industry, reducing CO2 footprint, the only alternative is to switch to sustainable fuels.
Correct.
The good and the great news is that exactly the same path that I told you about, starting with the farm, not burning the stubble, you can use exactly the same route and convert it into a aviation fuel. Praj has worked very closely with a global leader on that called Gevo. We are working with them. We have developed the whole process of converting the process of taking the straw and bringing it to what is scientifically known as sugars. That's the process that we have mastered.
Okay.
And from there onwards, we have worked with them to convert it to the right kind recipe of enzymes and catalysts to convert it to the fuel. So we have done that. So I think, and we will see the similar thing. The next big thing that is likely to happen is, as you see, today ethanol is blended in petrol. Let's look at India as an example. Our diesel consumption in the economy is at a factor of 6 to 7 higher than petrol consumption.
Correct.
Imagine if I can blend diesel and ethanol.
Interesting.
I am suddenly
not aware of
opening
that.
up a completely
Right,
different
right,
market space.
Right.
Praj has recognized that while we have to start somewhere. So we are starting with 4-wheelers and cars and petrol vehicles. We are working very closely with the institute called ARAI, which is an autonomous research institute, government of India on the all things automotive, to work with them on a plan to say how can we use ethanol, which is, by the way, not known to many people, but ethanol is a high oxygenating agent. It releases oxygen when you put it in the combustion chamber. So that allows the automakers to go to higher compression ratios, which means that they are more efficient engines. And that's a very interesting. Otherwise, how do you do that? So you would probably heard of this knocking in the engine.
Yeah.
So
earlier used to put lead. That was a very old technology.
That's a very old technology. But just imagine that if you can put something with which releases oxygen,
correct,
then you can actually increase the compression because here the octane numbers are in excess of 100.
Okay.
So and if you remember the lead days, we were struggling to go to 1992, that kind of number. So it allows you to have more efficient and compact engines. So that's the challenge of the tech. And the good news is it's already there because it's running in Brazil. So it's not that we have to invent the technology. The same car makers globally now, and they already have the technology on the flex fuels. So very clearly we are seeing that. We are also seeing more and more airlines now coming up and adopting the aviation fuel. I am very happy to share with you that we made a sample of the fuel here. We got in a sample from our collaborators using the technology. We even submitted it to Indian Defence Forces, and our fuel is certified as fit to fly.
Excellent. There was some test that was done, I think a couple of years back, that was in the news in India, one of the first biofuel flights or a blended biofuel.
Yes, which was done. So there are different routes by which you can reach. And one of
this is using feedstock or is using
this is using rice. This is using rice straw.
Rice straw. Okay, interesting.
So one of the focus area for us at Praj has always been to say, well, maybe that's because we are also a commercial organization. We think like this, that if I develop a technology, we must be able to put it to use.
Of course.
Yeah, and we must be able to scale it up for the benefit of the nation.
Right.
Now, that's why we focused on saying the straw. When I say straw, it could be any straw.
Could be wheat.
It doesn't have rice, wheat, sugarcane, bagasse. It could be any of these. So I'm using rice straw only as a representation. So agricultural residue of any kind. And the technology or the depth lies in converting that to what I was mentioning earlier as sugars. Once you have sugars, you can ferment them to wherever you want.
Right.
And that's what we have specialized in. That is how the second generation ethanol progress also came at our end.
Right.
Today we are among the world's leading companies with the technology on second generation ethanol, as it is called, which uses agriculture waste. We are setting up 3 plants in India,
Right.
which will go on stream end of next year, from end of next year. And we are very confident that in many ways, if you look at, let me draw a little bit of parallel here. If you look at what was happening to solar or wind 5-10 years ago, today we just read the news yesterday that the tariff has dropped to 2 rupees.
Yeah.
I remember there was a time when tariff was 19 rupees
Yeah.
in solar. It takes some time for the technology to come to that level, but we have to start somewhere.
Yes,
and
yes.
I think government of India has done a fantastic thing
Right.
by pushing this
So
up.
I think, so coming back to the original question, right? So realistically, how big can this get in, say, well, let's not look at too far in the future, but 2025 or 2030, what
So-
portion of our energy, because it's very important for us economically. I mean, our dependence on fossil fuels and imports, both economically and strategically, has been one of our biggest problems. So how can we
Yes.
reduce
so,
that?
So to me, this is the situation that actually creates the biggest smile on my face, because we are right now a drop in the ocean.
Right, right.
So how big is the ocean is the whole energy of the
full
the economy,
consumption.
you know, and we can define economy in any which way we want.
Mm.
And we are, as you mentioned, in petrol 5%.
Right.
So petrol by itself is not a big number in
So
the
small
economy.
number, yeah.
And that's what I said, that so when we work and we go to diesel and then blend, then the gas becomes the reality, the compressed biogas as it is called, or renewable gas. The aviation fuel comes into being. You can just imagine, today we have a possibility to convert entire India's entire energy demand. If I take a look at it, and one fine day if I'm sitting and saying, okay, everything that's possible to be converted has been converted. We are looking at an energy in excess of 15% of India's energy needs being met this route.
Excellent. And I think even if we make, say, 5% progress, it's
And and
It's
today
direct impact.
it's nowhere near. It's today's very small fraction number.
and given the agri nature of our economy to a great extent even now, and especially I think we would never run out of raw materials, I would think.
Yes, so things happen, right? So today I burn my stubble.
Right.
Tomorrow, when a use emerges, which is financially remunerative for me, I will also start to pay attention. And one of the big areas that you mentioned, Brazil earlier, that they have worked upon is to increase the per hectare yield. And I think a lot of work has to happen in that direction as well. So we have the land, we have arable land, which can definitely be put to good use. The increasing productivity on that side will also help. To put some numbers, if you look at let us take the 5,000 plant example. If we were to take the 5,000 plants, it roughly, on a thumb rule basis, represents an investment of 2 lakh crores of rupees over 5 years. And even over 10 years, that's a very big number.
Yeah. It's huge.
Right? It's a huge number. We just signed an MOU with Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas 2 days ago, where we are committed to provide technology and engineering services to all potential developers who would want to use this route to produce gas.
Right.
And I'm very happy to say that we were the eminent company that signed this. There were others as well, but we signed for the maximum number of support that we will be extending. So we clearly see we are at a very crucial juncture now, where and I'm very confident because, as I said, these are commercially viable technologies.
Yes, yeah. And commercially viable for all stakeholders. I mean, commercially viable obviously for the end consumer, for the manufacturer, and most importantly, commercially attractive for the farmer. I think one of the things I remember reading about some of the papers that you have put out, the value this can bring to the farmer is something that we are not highlighting a whole lot, but that's huge. I mean, today they are mostly wasting that by burning. They can actually earn some money out of it.
And this is where I want to say, sometimes you always find out why was iPhone invented by Steve Jobs and things like that. There's always, or why the Windows came about, because Mr. Gates sneaked out in the middle of the night to go to Washington University and work on the computer. We also have a very similar story. Dr. Pramod Chaudhary, who's the founder of our company, he comes from an agrarian background. And from day one, even though he went on to do his engineering at IIT, he was very clear in his head that I have to do something that makes the life of farmer better. So a lot of our work eventually is premised on that platform. And I think that's what actually translates to some good amount of work that we've been doing. It takes all forms of shapes and sizes, the enzymes in the laboratory, and we say what's farmer got to do with enzyme.
Correct.
But I think that's the path to take it there.
Yeah.
But the base of this is his.
Right. No, and I think because if we can fundamentally figure out some economics there as well, maybe it will take a few years. But if they start earning some fixed amount per acre or per hectare,
Yes.
I think that will have a significant impact on the rural economy of India.
yes.
And today, that money is basically going out of the country when we import
Plus-
crude oil.
Plus, it's going up in smoke.
Yeah, it's both for the environment as well as for the money. So I think there's a lot to talk about, and unfortunately we don't have too much time. But there are two things I definitely want to touch upon in our discussion today. So one is all of this, as you mentioned early on, requires technology and requires R&D and investment. One of the things that's been very impressive in terms of what Raj specifically has done is the huge R&D investments. And I was fortunate to visit the Praj R&D center here in Pirangut near Pune many years back, and that's very interesting. And I think it's important for the viewers to understand that R&D is non-trivial in this space, and it's very important. And it's great to see a company based here in Pune do some of it. So if you can talk a little bit about the kind of work that's been done, and more importantly, what is the kind of work that you're going to do in the next 5-10 years?
Sure. So, yes, technology is at the base of everything, and I was saying that if we're trying to drive a much larger cause, obviously technology has a very, very vital role to play. And I say this with a lot of pride that in 2008-9, when the world was melting, Dr. Chaudhary was putting up Praj's R&D center in Pirangut. That's when it was built. And many people have said, what are you doing 2008-9? The world is melting, you are putting money behind an R&D center. But I think it takes vision and commitment to get things through. And why I'm making this point is because understand that if at that time I'm committed to do it,
Right.
it's an unwavering and
Exactly.
irrevocable commitment. And I think that's what Praj has made by following the passion and direction of the founder, that we will do this, and it's an irrevocable commitment. The lab, the center focuses on many dimensions that they do work on. Fundamentally, it is working in the biospace, and I use the word bio, so biofuel, bioenergy, and now biochemicals. So biomobility was one platform that I already explained to you. We have also launched a new platform called BioPrism that would enable us to convert the same, starting with the same straws or raw material, convert that to sustainable, renewable chemicals. The most, of
Those
course,
are
the
also
most
important.
common known is the renewable plastic.
Correct.
Or bioplastic as it is called. Many people know it, which is also that area that we are working. But there are many chemical chains. So fundamentally, if you think like this, so from the crude oil, you set up a refinery and the downstream industries, and you do the whole thing. Exactly the same concept we want to bring, that there is a biorefinery concept.
Excellent.
Where we are saying start with a straw, and you can end up with every single product that you actually end up on the crude oil side as well.
Excellent.
So that's the parallel that I want to draw for you. So biorefinery is a concept that we are working upon and trying to build this, and amazing work happens. The co-product development, for example, I can give you an example. So when we were working on the second generation ethanol, which was very much developed in these at Matrix, one of the challenges, of course, was to say, what do you do with the waste streams that get out of these processes? Right? When you process something, there will always be a waste stream. So our people, so one way is to say treat it. But we said no, treat is one dimension which we have to do when nothing is left. But is there a better way to finding a co-product out of this?
Right.
So our people work. So we are now, and when I say this, you'll certainly start to connect the earlier statement I made. So we are now working on creating bitumen.
Interesting.
Bitumen comes out of crude oil as well.
Right.
We have already successfully developed the process for the development of what's called as lignosulfonates. Lignosulfonates are moisture binding materials that are used when you make concrete mixtures out of sea. Today India imports all of it. It does not produce anything. So that will become another, and remember, this comes from nature's products. You can keep getting it back. When we produce biogas, for example, in our process, a very good byproduct is the fertilizer.
Right.
And this is to me is a huge plus, because you get almost entire mass back to
full
the
100%
field.
is utilized.
Yeah,
Whether it's
and
energy, whether it's fertilizer,
exactly.
whether it's
You've
stock.
taken the gas, but
Right.
then you put it back in the field.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
and that's the whole idea of. So you think like this. So now
Right.
this is a virtuous circle, right?
Of course.
It's
of
now
course,
starting
of
from the
course.
field and going back to the field.
Of course.
And everything in between. So
And
that's
I mean,
the whole idea.
that's ideally, even if it's not 100%, it's still significantly better than what
Yeah,
we do
so
today, which is pretty
we,
much always.
we call it circular bioeconomy, and
Yeah.
many words. But the fundamental idea is you start from the field,
Right.
you end at the field,
Right.
and do everything in between.
Excellent.
So there is another way to describe this in simpler terms. So when we take the crude oil out of the sea, offshore or onshore, as the case may be, we are taking hydrocarbons out with an
Correct,
HNC
correct,
molecule,
correct.
right? And we are thinking little differently, and we're saying ultimately nature has willed the whole biosphere to be in a particular way. So yes, carbohydrates are one way. Hydrocarbons are one way.
They
The
were
other way,
buried there 100 million years ago.
but there is another way of carbohydrates, which is
Yeah.
again CNH molecules.
Right.
So from hydrocarbons to carbohydrates.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From normal oil refineries to biorefineries. That's the way we see the future.
I think this is going to be very, very exciting, and I'm glad that we are bringing this out to our audience, both researchers, SMEs. One important area I wanted to touch upon towards the end is we here in Pune pride ourselves on the R&D and the research and the education strengths that we have here. We also have excellent startup ecosystems. We here at Maratha Chamber are also involved with supporting various kinds of startups. So we have institutes here like the National Chemical Laboratory, the NCCS, ICER Pune,
Yep.
Vasantdada Sugar Institute. So we have this excellent ecosystem, and we also have startups coming out of incubators like the Venture Center, which is also, I know Pramod Chaudhary is involved with that. So what can you talk about this whole ecosystem and how how Praj is interacting with this ecosystem both ways? And how can this ecosystem progress further? What opportunities do startups have or PhD researchers have in this field? You as a leader, how would you advise them?
Yeah, so I think if you look at it, we are very consciously aware of the fact what this, as you rightly put, in our ecosystem in this city, we are very fortunate to have these institutes of eminence, VSI, NCL, ICER. On the other hand, we also have companies like us, and also a great confluence of the IT companies.
Yes.
And this also means that there is an abundance, and I'm using a very positive sense, of engineering talent and scientific community talent that becomes available to us. So I think it would only stand to natural logic that we find a way to contribute to the system, but also then leverage the system in both ways, right? We are, for example, working with ICER, in a very constructive fashion to support the young talent when they are growing up there as students and as researchers. We are funding. We work with NCL very closely. We strongly believe that going forward, the confluence of all the innovation will happen at the intersection. So where IT meets biotechnology,
Of course.
or where bioenergy meets the chemical zones, and we will completely transform. So petrochemical, and we are not saying this or that. We believe we will have to live in a world where we are positively constructing a future which allows our children to live at least, if not more, but at least, and enjoy the same facilities that we have, and not compromise on their lifestyle or anything. And that means doing a lot on the sustainability side today. And that's where we believe that a great working, whether these industry associations like MCCIA, the institutes of eminence that we spoke about, the engineering college systems that we have, even the other industry partners, Praj is very strongly committed to work in a very interactive and collaborative manner, not only here, because we believe that there's obviously a strong platform here. We also believe that we will also be able to bring our partners from outside the country who have done some good work and we believe it's complementary work.
Right. No, I think those are important message. I'm glad that you're highlighting this, because I think we want bright students, science students especially, who come out of some of our top institutes like the IITs and IISERs, to look at this as a very fundamental and interesting challenge that this generation needs to solve for the next 20, 30, 50 years, right? Far too many of our bright minds in the technology field are getting carried away in the IT industry, and that's why I'm glad that you're highlighting this. I think another area that got highlighted in 2020 was the whole immunology and vaccine research area, which many people were not looking at, but now suddenly it's in the news. So I think this is great to hear from you. One of the areas that we've talked about briefly, but in terms of the climate change impact and in terms of the sustainable energy initiatives, clearly a lot of the things are being done at the world stage right now in terms of COP15, in terms of the discussions that happened in Paris a few years back. India has been one of the few countries that's been leading the efforts in terms of meeting the commitments. And I think from that standpoint, I think the role of biofuels is especially important. We have wind, solar, but I think biofuels is going to be one of the more important areas. So a quick comment on that?
Yes, so I think I'm very glad that India is leading the path. I think we are very ideally suited to be the leader. This is a new era of energy, and we can really build a global leadership position for the country. We are very glad to contribute the small way in which we can as an organization. But what's very important is very clearly biofuels, there is no debate about the fact saying do biofuels save on CO2 emissions. They do.
Of course.
There is no argument around whether they do or they don't.
Mm.
They do. And therefore, the higher is the mix of biofuels in your energy mix as a country or as an economy, lower is going to be your greenhouse gas emission.
Correct.
That's a given.
Right.
There's another fact that for countries like India, our per capita energy consumption will keep increasing as we go by in the time frame, right? A, because we are starting out very low. B, because we are on a path of development.
Right.
So, and everywhere in the world economies, wherever economies have grown, a good indicator has been per capita energy consumption. And I think we have a great choice to make right now, saying, of course, I do not want to not develop. I want to develop faster.
Of course.
But not at the cost of environment, not at the cost of our future generation. And I think that's where biofuels will have a very, very significant role to play, because they address all these issues in a very holistic sort of way.
Right.
And I always believe that there are environmental goals, but they also need to have an economic hook.
Correct.
Or connect.
Of course.
And I think biofuels they provide that connect, because you are involving the farmer. It's an inclusive thing.
Right.
It's an inclusive economy dimension that you are the lowest strata or the lowest or the bottom of the value chain.
Correct.
And the end of the value chain, and then it becomes a circular thing.
Correct. And all are benefiting in the process.
And all are benefiting. And
Correct.
I think that's the whole idea. It's not a pyramidal structure.
Right.
Those pyramidal structures prone to fall over a period of time.
Correct.
But a circular structure is much more resilient.
Right.
And I think that's what is happening with
I think
biofuels.
that's key. Let's come to a related. We're talking about biomobility. Let's come to a related technology which has been in the news consistently for past many years. That's electric mobility, or EV, right? Even in your past life, as you have mentioned earlier, you have worked in the automotive component sector, and regular mobility has been an area of interest, not just biomobility. But there's one person, namely Elon Musk, who has made EVs extremely popular over the last 5 years. As many people say, EVs were around even 120 years back. The first electric car was built in the early 20th century, or maybe even earlier than that, right? Now, because of multiple reasons, one is the vision, the marketing, the evangelization or evangelism that has been shown by Elon Musk. There are other benefits as well. The battery technology has improved significantly. Ultimately, it is economics driven. How do you see biomobility and EV, electric mobility, work together, coexist? I personally believe they are not competition. We need so much of mobility, we need so much of energy that we need all of it. But would like to hear your views on this.
Good. So I think the whole equation of E or bio, but the fact that mobility needs to change its basis is the important one to me, that we need to go to a more sustainable form of transportation, because that the need for transportation and movement is not going to go away.
Correct.
Therefore, we have to make sure that we fulfill that need in a more structured and sustainable way. Both e-mobility and biomobility solutions that I talked about meet that need. So from that perspective, I think both are good. The question that we asked ourselves was, what should India do? And then we extended that logic a little later to some other countries, and I'll share that with you. We said, we are a big automotive components manufacturing economy.
Okay, yeah.
A typical four-wheeler today, which runs on an IC engine, has 17,000 parts. And the way the automotive industry is structured, that means there are 17,000 multiplied by number of companies supplying organizations that are involved in the manufacturing of these, because the eventual automaker only assembles these.
Correct. EV probably has a fraction.
Exactly. Whereas EV has 700 parts.
Yeah.
700 to 17,000. And automotive component sector involves and employs many
Millions.
people compared to what EV will do. So that's one reason we should think about what should be future of mobility for us. The second one, if you look at biofuels, I don't need any additional infrastructure.
Correct.
My current infrastructure is ready, available, ready to
The
dispense.
distribution,
It's all available. The whole thing is available, right? 3, I'm fundamentally not changing the technology. It's still an IC engine.
Right.
Yeah? It is still a 17,000 part car.
Correct.
And therefore, it allows the switchover much
more easy.
Much more
and
easy.
I'll add one more point. I think this whole EV thing is great, provided we are using sustainable energy generated in the first place.
Which
I
is
think with bio,
which is
that's the
important.
non-issue.
But somebody will say, now when
Solar
using
and
solar is
wind
2
and-
rupees, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Yes, and the answer is yes. But we have to understand. So does that mean electric is not correct? I'm not saying that. If you're not an agrarian economy, if you're a very small country, it may make sense for you. You're a very rich country. It makes sense for you. Because then in some countries, governments have a problem of finding out where to spend money.
Correct.
And countries like us will want to think from where to get the money, because we have so many things to do.
Right.
So I think it's a matter of deciding what is the priority for the.
And that's an important point. I think each country has to decide.
Each
And for
country has to
India, we are an agrarian economy to a large extent, at least at a religious level, and we have so much land as well, right? And I think from that standpoint, for a developed country that is anyway importing agriculture products, for them it probably may not make sense.
You're not an agrarian economy. You're rich. You are small population. Your solutions may be very different than you're an agrarian economy. You are a very large population, and you have resources competing for capital. Right. So I think that's very important dimension to understand. So we need to define on E versus this, and one more dimension I want to make, especially for on the E side. Let us understand that the whole, as of today, the technology that is known on the battery side, the raw materials on the battery side are concentrated in one economy, sands.
That's a big
and that means import substitute goes out, the local job creation goes out, you are in a much more of a geopolitical play, and we have to ask this question, saying, is this what we want to do? Yeah, maybe somebody will develop a different battery which does not depend on these resources, fine, but till that day comes, biofuels are locally produced.
Correct.
You are completely independent
of it.
It generates jobs, it protects jobs, it generates new jobs, it gives your farmer money, it keeps the country's money within the country. I can grow the list.
Of course.
But I am strong proponent for biomobility, not so. At least for India and
Makes
all
sense.
economies which are agrarian, energy importing,
Makes
must look at biomobility as the preferred solution and not electric.
Makes sense. I think you've highlighted this theme of sustainable fuels, and I think this is probably the most important message, and I think this has to be done at the entire ecosystem level, whether it's government, whether it's industry, whether it's consumers, whether it's any other person. And that's something that we haven't done in the past, and I'm glad that you highlighted that over the past few years the government policies are really pulling this together,
Yes.
and the industries are working with it, the research institutes are working with it, and that makes me very optimistic about where we will be in the next 5 to 10 years in this field. Because economically and from an environment perspective, this is something that we don't have a choice. This is something that India absolutely has to do. The world needs to do, but let's start with India first.
Exactly.
And I'm glad that Pune as a city and Praj as one of the top pioneering companies based here is taking the lead in this particular area. So I'm glad we could have this brief discussion. Obviously, there's lots to talk about. We could maybe do a few follow-up chats on specific areas, but I think this was very helpful for our viewers. And I would like to thank you sincerely from MCCI, from me personally, for joining this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.